So it is with tremendous pleasure that I welcome our very last keynote speaker for this session. I'm so lucky to welcome to the stage Sarah McNab. Sarah is a general paediatrician and she's also the medical director for the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne. Ooh. She has used PhD. Sorry?
Just got an upgrade, not for the whole hospital.
Not for the whole hospital. Well, not yet anyway, maybe. The future, right? She's going to talk to us today about her founding project of CIRCAN, and welcome to the stage, Sarah. It's great to have you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think it's going to sound like a cliche over the next few days. We've heard it already, but it is such a privilege to be back face to face, to be able to reconnect with friends and colleagues and already to meet new people and start to connect. So thank you, everyone. Oh, yes, that's important. Thank you. So I have had the privilege of speaking at Don't Forget the Bubbles, and actually I was on this stage at the original Bubbles conference back in 2017, talking about my PhD research and letting you all know about that. And then I think it was the following year I spoke about doing a PhD. So today I'm going to take you a step further along on the journey. So what happened after the PhD for me, but also specifically, I'm really proud to introduce you all to CIRCAN, which is the Children's Inpatient Research Collaboration of Australia and New Zealand, and hopefully inspire some of you to get involved. So this is where we left off last time. I just finished my PhD. I was, deliriously happy, champagne in hand, very proud of the research that we had achieved over that time. But of course, this is the Instagram, slightly blurry Instagram version of the story. You know, what you don't see there is what's going on below the surface. And in this instance, quite literally below the surface, this was my middle of three boys. Life was general chaos. I felt very much like this. I had so much going on. I had my family. It was all fantastic stuff. I had my family. I'd just finished this project that I was proud of, and I'd got a little bit of the research bug. But I'd also just got my first inpatient position, which was really exciting, and I was dabbling in clinical leadership as well. So I just could not find a cohesive story to put all of this together. I also was no longer naive to how much work research is. So I couldn't think of what is the next best project or best study that I want to, bite into and spend years and years answering another question. I'd been quite happy with the question that I'd already answered, and I just couldn't commit, really. So now I didn't realise we had a clinical pearls competition, so I have decided let's throw some of those in. My first clinical pearl for you is get a mentor. So I joined a formal mentorship program. So this is formal mentorship, not just the people you look up and you admire and you try to emulate. This was formal mentorship with a peer mentor group and with a senior mentor. And what that did is it gave me some time and space to take a step back and to think about, well, what is it about research that I like? What is it that makes me sparkle? What was it that I loved? What's the aspect, that you love? And this is something, again, hopefully a pearl for all of you. Think about the aspects of your work that you love. So for me with research, and it would be different for everyone, I realised it wasn't so much answering the question itself. It was developing the idea. It was critiquing a protocol so that it was bulletproof and so that it would answer the question without, reviewers saying, oh, but that's not relevant or generalisable to our setting. It was working in a team. It was supporting and building a team. It was developing a research culture. So then I had the slightly grainy light bulb moment, which was my next research project doesn't need to be a study at all. What I'd love is to collaborate and build a research network in inpatient general paediatrics. This was by no means a novel idea. The Predict network, all of you, I hope, would be familiar with, has been doing this for many years in the emergency space. And I'd been admiring them. I'd worked particularly alongside Franz through my PhD work. So I was very, very familiar with the concept. But I felt like there was a real gap in inpatient general paediatrics. There are a lot of individual places that were doing really lovely research. But to me, it felt like there was a lack of collaboration. I also felt like there was a lack of culture of research for the patients that we see. So when a patient comes to a public hospital, I feel like they pretty much realise that they're going to be exposed to education. So they're going to see training doctors, and they're usually fine with that. They'll see medical students often, and most people accept that and are fine with that. But there's not really a culture in public hospitals that patients will be exposed to or have the opportunity to be involved with research. And that's something that I was keen to also change. It's there in little pockets, so I feel like our neonatal intensive care units do it pretty well. They have sort of an ongoing relationship with families. They often hand out brochures at the start of a stay to say, you know, these are the opportunities that we might ask you to invite you to join. Oncology, you know, often patients are recruited to a clinical trial on their day of diagnosis, but it's not really a culture, as far as I'm concerned, in general paediatrics. So what did I do? Here is me. I wasn't a director of a department back then. I just finished a PhD. I was a relatively new consultant. And here I was like, I'm going to build this research network for the whole of Australia and New Zealand. And so I went and got some advice. Franz, particularly from Predict, who's just amazing. I know he's coming. I'm not sure if he's here yet, but he was really so generous with his time and energy in terms of saying, you can do this. And I guess I was looking at Predict like this, and he took me back to the start to explain, you know, how it built a long time. I did go to try and get a little bit of funding for my time, and the feedback that I got from that was you don't have enough gravitas to pull people in, which wasn't, they weren't trying to be mean, you know, it was a really fair feedback. They were saying, why would people want to come, you know, and work with you? Like, people don't know who you are, which was completely fair, because the feedback they gave was start small. So again, another little clinical pearl for the competition, start small with your ideas. And they said to me, if you can get 1 or 2 hospitals who are keen to collaborate with you, that will be a success. And so I sort of took that. So I then I managed to get an invite to a dinner that had the directors of paediatrics from around Victoria. I think there were around about 25 of them. And so I went there trying to get 1 or 2 hospitals to, you know, come with me and let's collaborate. So I pitched the idea, and what was absolutely amazing was that all of them, every single one of them said, oh, we love that idea, we'd love to be involved. So suddenly my idea of starting with 1 or 2 hospitals grew to Victoria like overnight, which was great. And then it became like, I don't know, I'm a bit old, so a little bit like a chain letter. You know, people used to have a chain letter. So people emailed people, and they emailed their friends. And suddenly, within a month, we had this many hospitals. There were 42 hospitals around Australia and New Zealand who had a person who said, I'd love to be involved with this. So that was overwhelming, but amazing. And this is actually the part of my talk where my journey ends and the people take over. And it was fantastic listening to Ben earlier talking about the strengths and being stronger together. So, you know, a piece of advice, use your team, get to know your team. This is relevant whether you're talking about being in a research network or whether you're on a ward round, you know. Get to know your team, know their strengths and their weaknesses. Also know your own strengths and particularly your own weaknesses and how that team can support you. So we suddenly had this fantastic group of people, all enthusiastic, completely different ranges of research experience, people who had never done research, people who were professors. I've got a co-chair, so Pete Billerman was kind enough to co-chair the network with me. And we met for the first time, it was just before, well, maybe 12 months before COVID hit, so we got to meet face to face, and CIRCAN was born. So the Children's Inpatient, getting nervous, I'm forgetting our things. Children's Inpatient Research Collaboration of Australia and New Zealand. So you can look at that QR, it just takes you to our website, so you can look at that later, particularly if you'd like to be involved. The general philosophy of CIRCAN is that we increase capacity and output of paediatric research by basically leveraging the strengths of individuals. We try to be a very inclusive network. So by that, I mean that in lots of different levels. So anybody, we meet once a month, anybody is welcome. We're particularly keen on this being non-tertiary, okay? I mean, tertiary centres, absolutely. I work at one, very welcome to be involved, but we're very conscious that traditionally research happens in tertiary centres, and most of paediatric care happens outside of tertiary centres. So we're very keen for non-tertiary centres to be involved, and they are. We also want to be multidisciplinary. I think by the nature of how it started with me speaking to people that I knew, it started off being quite doctor heavy, but I'm really proud to say that we've got amazing nurses on board who are brilliant, and we'd like to be more multidisciplinary with other allied health people involved and consumers as well. It doesn't matter if you've never done research, you're welcome to come along and we'd love to see you. I think for all of us, if everyone in their day-to-day job educates, right? You know, you're teaching every single day that you're at work. And it never occurs to you to not do that just because you might not have an education degree. So similarly, I'd love to embed research into the culture of what we do every single day. You know, if you want to do a higher degree, absolutely, you know, come along, we'll support you. But you don't need to have that as your background to come and join us. One of the beautiful side effects of this has been also an amazing sense of community. So I was from Melbourne, locked down. So being able to we meet once a month online with stacks of people from all over Australia and New Zealand and find out what was happening in hospitals all around the country through COVID was just an absolute privilege. And one of our first projects, led by a team in Sydney, has been to look at the case mix of patients that were coming through all of the hospitals around the country and around Australia and New Zealand over the last few years. One thing I'm particularly proud of is we've had a symposium the last few years and we're planning to make it an annual event. So this is for people to come and present their research. So similar to, you know, a scientific program at a conference, people come and present their research, and we've had fantastic people, nurses, medical students, trainees. We've actually had very few qualified paediatricians. So it's very much, again, a very inclusive and supportive environment with some prizes. So this was the groundwork of the network, but then we wanted to focus on getting a clinical trial off the ground. And again, Pete came to us with the idea that, you know, what better way to embed research into the culture of what we do than to go target one of the most common things that we see in our hospitals. Now, this is actually my son, just a slight little anecdote. This was taken when I was at Bubbles in 2017. Some of you remember I took a phone call that my child was being micro-ambulanced to hospital with asthma. This was him in the hospital a couple of days later, and I've kind of used that photo quite a few times since. So the thought was, let's target preschool wheeze, and Pete had, you know, heard about this great idea, which was a product called OM85, which is a bacterial lysate that most of you wouldn't have heard of, I would imagine. It's not used traditionally in Australia, although it's used a lot overseas. So it's basically chopped up bacteria, and the idea is that it triggers an immune response that moves your immune response on exposure to viruses away from wheeze to a more healthy outcome. Great evidence for it in small trials, but no large-scale trial. So we're lucky enough to have our first PhD student who's sitting here in the third row, Jessica Costa-Pinto, who is leading this trial, and I'm sure we'll be delighted to talk to you about this trial through the course of the next few days. So the OM85 trial, or the ARROW trial, is a trial where we are randomising children to either OM85 or placebo, children who have been admitted to hospital with an episode of preschool wheeze. And the primary outcome is to prevent future admissions. It's really exciting. It's novel. It's got the potential, if it works, to change practice, so fingers crossed. Of course, we have, I think it's 40 sites that have signed up to this. 27 have kicked off recruitment. We were lucky enough to get NHMRC funding, but obviously not enough to have a research nurse at each of those sites. So we've got a novel way of recruiting. So sure, we're educating people at all of the sites, but we're not asking people on site to do the consent. We're asking them to introduce the family to the study and scan this QR code. So that QR code, it's a little bit embarrassing because it goes to a video that's got me on it, along with Pete Villerman. And we explain the trial as part of the video. And then families are invited to click on a link, which goes to a central team who do the recruitment process from there and the consent. So the idea is that it's pretty easy for the clinicians to be involved, and so, you know, obviously will be cost effective. It means that we can scale up, you know, really effectively. And the exciting thing is that it's working. You know, I don't know if OM85 is working, it's a blinded trial, but the study design in terms of recruitment is working. So we're aiming towards having over 2,000 patients recruited. It's just started, but we're already, you know, well on the way, well over 50 patients in the first little while. So what does the future hold? Who knows? I mean, who would have thought when we started this a couple of years ago what the next few years would involve? But for us, we're at the moment doing a Delphi study, so that's basically trying to work out what other people think the research priorities for this network should be. We're also just talking to some of our international counterparts. So there are similar networks in the UK, in Canada and the US, and we've started some conversations with them. So to wrap up, it's a bit of a call to arms, which is to get involved. Now, CIRCAN might not be the right network for you. You might not do inpatient general paediatrics. But for those of you who do emergency, there's PREDICT. There are really strong NICU research there's a really strong NICU research network. So get involved with whichever network is most relevant to you. And if there's not one, we might have to talk about the journey so far. Again, it doesn't matter if you're not an NHMRC, grant holder. We're very happy to see you. Very quick side tangent, because, when we say get involved, a whole lot of you will be like me and go, oh, but how? I think we get so much career advice along the way to say, you need to learn how to say no to things. And I certainly could do better with that. We do need to learn to put boundaries around ourselves because we all live complex and busy lives. But my anecdote is that my entire career so far has been built by saying yes to opportunities that were absolutely not on the radar. I was not going to do a PhD. I partly did general paediatrics because some of the other specialties said that I would have to do a PhD to do it. So that's partly why I went to general paediatrics. So it's absolutely ludicrous that I'm standing here today talking about this. But again, my career has been built by saying yes to the right opportunities. So over the next 3 days, you are going to sit here and listen to fantastic talks, and you're going to get inspired. And if you're a little bit like me, you'll get lots of ideas for questions that we haven't answered, and you'll start asking the questions about what we could do next. And so my challenge to you is to write them down or tweet them. And from there, get in contact again with us or with whoever is able to support you, making those, turning those ideas into reality. Because all of you can be our future generation of researchers ready to answer tomorrow's questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wow. It's so funny. As someone who's just finished a master's, I can appreciate the sudden, I'm not going to do a PhD. I'm not going to do a PhD.
Come on,
oh, I'm doing a PhD. That's so wonderful. Yeah. Thank you. No, so have we got any questions from the audience, from Twitter, about CIRCAN, about anything that Sarah has raised? It's quite dark in the auditorium, so you're going to have to wave your hands around. If anyone? Not yet? Not yet? So what I have questions. I always have questions. We have a question? Oh, we have a question. Fantastic. This is amazing. I think you might have to make
Layla.
Is Layla?
Yeah.
Do we have is there a microphone at the back, or shall we send this one back? Brooke, can I ask you, could you run this back up there for me?
Hi, Sarah. Thank you for your inspiring talk. Were there any points that was a deal breaker for you?
That's a really good question. Not really as such. I think I sort of go into things with such a healthy dose of naivety. Sometimes I don't realise what I'm biting off until I'm far too invested in it to stop. I think I thought that there was a very realistic chance that we'd get a whole lot of enthusiastic people together and then it would just fizzle into nothing. Obviously research is very reliant on the next grant, and we had no funding to start with. We were really fortunate that Arrow grant got up. It was our first application. That's unheard of, really. It was in a round where 5% of applications were successful. So there was I should emphasise, there was a healthy dose of luck, and also having been surrounded by fantastic people who helped get the grant, or who led the grant. The deal breaker, No, not really. Sorry, I'm a bit stubborn. I think my biggest fear was letting people down because I kind of got people enthusiastic. I'm still worried about that. So there's a lot of people in the room who are involved with CIRCAN. I'm still worried about that. So I've got a whole lot of enthusiastic people involved, but as I've said, I've also got a whole lot of stuff on the cards. So it's, a part of what drives me is not letting people down. Yeah.
That's your steps for the day. So I love taking part in research projects. I love it. I love clinical research. Tell me about CIRCAN then. So if we go back to our hospitals, how can we get involved in CIRCAN? Say we see that preschool visa. Do we need to consent? Do we need the paperwork?
Oh, so two separate questions. To be involved with CIRCAN, just reach out. You can tweet me, you can email me, you can go into CIRCAN and there's a get involved thing, and then you can come to our meetings. It's completely open to anybody. In terms of if you go back to work and you see the preschool visa, you can just show them the video and ask them to self-refer. If you're if you work at one of the CIRCAN sites that has set up a data sharing agreement, so there's a whole lot of boring bits of research that is all about, the governance, which is important, but not interesting. So if you're at one of the sites that has data sharing arrangement, you can provide the family's details to the CIRCAN central team and they'll follow up the family with a phone call. For those of you who are working, in a private practice or are working at a site that you're not sure if they're involved or you're not even sure if the patient's eligible or not, you can show the QR, the family can watch the video and the family can self-refer themselves. So you don't have to, you're just not allowed to share their details with us unless we have an agreement in place. But yes, absolutely, if you see a preschool visa, share away, please.
Make a note of that, folks, right?